Hello. Yeah. Hello. Good evening. Welcome to
Good
this
evening, sir.
webinar. Let's start this webinar. Before we actually start, I think I would request all of you to remain muted and please switch off your video. This webinar is being live streamed in YouTube and also shared in Facebook. So please keep your mic muted and your video switch off. Yes, I think we can start the webinar and we still have participants joining. Welcome all of you to this session. Let me introduce myself. I'm Dilip Kumar Reddy, working with Pesticide Action Network India as Assistant Director. Please be noted that we are going live and please keep your mic muted and your video off. Welcome all of you once again. And thank you all for joining this session. Before we start the webinar, let me remind you some house rules. This session will be recorded and live streamed in YouTube channel of Pesticide Action Network India. It will be also available in Pesticide Action Network India's Facebook page. Please turn off your video and mute yourself when you are not speaking. If you have any questions, please share that in your chat box so that we will have a open forum after all the presentations are done by the panelists and all the questions will be addressed there. And also, if you would like to speak during the open forum, please raise your hand and wait for the facilitator to acknowledge you. Let us start. Before we get into our speakers, let me give you a brief background to the topic of this webinar, drone-based pesticide applications, implications on health and regulation. Recently, we see a lots of promotional activities regarding use of drone for pesticide application in agriculture sector. The Central Insecticide Board in 2019 has clarified that spraying of pesticides with a drone is illegal in India. It further clarified that aerial spraying of pesticides needed prior approval. However, various government institutions and drone companies seem to be encouraging such spraying activities nowadays. And recently, the Plant Protection Division of Department of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare has issued a standard operating procedure and approved a list of pesticide formulations for drone spraying. However, the relevant legislations and regulations on aerial spraying is lacking in India. Aerial spraying impacts a large area and is not limited to target pests. Weather and wind conditions add to spread of chemicals. Spray drift takes the fine hazardous chemicals beyond the range of application. Drones and unmanned aerial vehicles can be a dangerous tool for spraying hazardous chemicals in many ways. Application of chemical pesticides being the predominant mode of pest control in India, use of drones for pesticide application may end up in dangerous situation which the agriculture department or the farmers or even general population would not be able to handle or control. Exposure to people and ecosystem and environmental contamination are major concerns. In this slide, this webinar is organized. Once again, I welcome all of you. We have our panelists, Dr. Narasimha Reddy, Dr. P. Indira Devi, Ms. Sarojini Rangam, and Sri Jai Kumar, who will be discussing on various aspects of drone application in India. Our first speaker for this webinar is Dr. Narasimha Reddy. Dr. Reddy is a public policy expert and he has been a passionate campaigner on environmental and developmental issues. He was a board member of IFOM Asia, member of the Cotton Advisory Committee and Advisory Council of Textile Exchange, a global non-profit. He has contributed to public discourse and policy changes in electricity, seed, rice, cotton, sugarcane, sericulture, handloom and textiles, land, water and other related areas. As an intense team player, he has built campaigns, advocacy programs and policy change projects. He is an author writing on different subjects in regional, national and international publications. He also guides students on their PhD and other research activities. I use this occasion to offer warm welcome to Dr. Narasimha Reddy ji. Reddy ji, please.
Thank you, Dilip. You are not introduced my work on pesticides as well. But anyway, that goes back long, almost 20 years of work on pesticide poisoning in India. I'll just open my presentation. Okay, I'll speak in English and Hindi. Of course, मेरा हिंदी उतना ठीक नहीं है, but मैं तो कोशिश करूँगा क्योंकि अब ये और एक आदमी को ट्रांसलेशन के लिए बुलाया तो उसमें टाइम प्रॉब्लम होता है, इसलिए I thought मैं खुद ट्रांसलेशन करूँगा. आपको ज़्यादातर तो ये इंग्लिश का शब्द ही अपने को यूज़ होता रहता है. फिर भी मैं तो कोशिश करूँगा दोनों भाषा में बताने के लिए. So thank you, Dilip. I'll just open my presentation. Okay, can you see the Dilip?
Yes, we can see. Please.
Okay, the contours of discussion today in this webinar will be like this. We are going to discuss some of the technology and uses. Of course, we are not on the top of the subject of technology, but wherever it is relevant, that is going to be discussed. And of course, the main objective is spraying implications. What happens when pesticide spraying is done by the drones. And importantly, I think that's my presentation will be on regulations and management, how government is looking at drone-based pesticide spraying. So I'm not discussing the usage advantages for drones in other areas. I think those are not part of the discussion today. So it will be completely directly related to pesticide spraying. So some of the comments might be related, might go beyond, but the core subject is this. And of course, I think we need to discuss drones in the Indian context. So that is going to come up, and I think other panelists are also going to discuss this. Aerial spraying, what has been the experience across the globe and its impact, especially pesticides. So I'm not going into the toxicity of the pesticides. I think that my esteemed panelists are going to discuss. Because of time restriction, I'll be discussing the core the regulation, because these are the recent developments, and there's a lot of what do you say activity happening around drones in the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course the private companies which are pushing both pesticides and drones. So this big agriculture is involved in all this. So let us go into detail. तो मैं यहाँ आज ज़्यादातर सरकार का जो रेगुलेशंस है, जो भी पाबंदी है, वो ज़्यादा डिस्कशन करूँगा. लेकिन यहाँ पर अब हम जो आज चर्चा करेंगे वो थोड़ा बहुत ड्रोन्स टेक्नोलॉजी होगा, और स्प्रेइंग से हमारे ऊपर उसका जो प्रभाव है उसके बारे में बात करेंगे. फिर ये अपना जो भारत का कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, अपना देश का कॉन्टेक्स्ट में इसका मतलब क्या है, इससे क्या होता, उसके बारे में बात करेंगे. फिर एरियल स्प्रेइंग, जो हवा से स्प्रेइंग करते हैं ये ड्रोन से, और इससे इसका जो अपना एक्सपीरियंस क्या है, अपना अनुभव क्या है, और इससे क्या हो सकता है, उसका प्रभाव किस पर ज़्यादा हो सकता है, वो पूरा चर्चा करेंगे. लेकिन वो थोड़ा अदर पैनलिस्ट भी बात करेंगे. मैं ज़्यादातर ये सरकार की नीतियाँ, सरकार की रवैया, उसके ऊपर मैं जोर देता हूँ. तो इसमें अभी जो बहुत अहम काम जो हो रहा है, उसमें मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सिविल एविएशन को कोऑर्डिनेशन एजेंसी के रूप में सरकार पहले से ही बना हुआ है. उसमें डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ सिविल एविएशन DGCA है. फिर ये पेस्टिसाइड स्प्रेइंग के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर को लाया गया. उसमें सेंट्रल इंसेक्टिसाइड बोर्ड एंड रजिस्ट्रेशन कमिटी CIBRC, इसका भी रोल होगा. अब ये जो सरकार का जो भी कदम है, उसमें ड्रोन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन जो भी है, ड्रोन फेडरेशन ऑफ इंडिया है, और जो प्राइवेट कंपनियां, उनका भी रोल अपने को दिखता है. और क्रॉप लाइफ जो पेस्टिसाइड का एक संगठन है, पेस्टिसाइड कंपनी का, उनका भी रोल दिखता है. लेकिन PMO, प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफिस, ये पूरा पीछे से इसके ऊपर जोर दे रहा है. तो लेकिन ये सामने नहीं दिखता PMO. So basically, I was saying, the Prime Minister's office has been pushing. Of course, if people want evidence, I don't have that evidence, but we know how Government of India is working in the last few years. So mainly, government has identified Ministry of Civil Aviation to regulate drones, or act upon everything related to drones. And in that, Director General of Civil Aviation, I think they play a crucial role. So they established a digital sky platform as part of this registration of drones. And in context of using drones in agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture and especially Central Insecticide Board and Registration Committee is involved. In fact, this role was brought because of our advocacy. Otherwise, I don't think it would have got any role in that. And if you can see this 4 or 5 legislations, this is what Ministry of Civil Aviation says proudly, that they brought drone rules 2021 and they amended it again this year, and they brought a national unmanned traffic management policy framework. This is about whenever there is number of drones, so traffic management, UTM is a traffic management policy framework. Then production linked incentive scheme for drones. So government wants to encourage drone production in India. So further they brought a production linked incentive for drones, and then there is a certification scheme for drones. So if you can see, all this began last year, and they were brought this year. So all this was done in a hurry. You can see that just within 2 years, government wants to build a complete ecosystem around drones. तो ये ड्रोन के बारे में जो 5 लेजिस्लेशन है, जो सरकार का नीतियाँ है, वो ड्रोन मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ सिविल एविएशन ये पिछले 2 साल में, ये इस साल और पिछले साल लाया गया है, और ये वो बहुत जल्दी में लाया गया है। ये मेरे को ऐसा महसूस लगता है, क्योंकि अब देख सकते हैं ड्रोन रूल्स पिछले साल ड्राफ्ट लाया, फिर उसके ऊपर कमेंटिंग होने के बाद फाइनल आ गया, फिर उसका अमेंडमेंट भी आया। तो ऐसा आखिर ड्रोन्स को अपना देश में ही प्रोडक्शन उत्पत्ति करने के लिए भी एक स्कीम दिया गया, एक इंसेंटिव स्कीम, सब्सिडी स्कीम भी है, अभी सर्टिफिकेशन स्कीम भी है। तो ये पूरा DGCA का रेगुलेशंस है। अब मैं जो बात करने वाला हूँ एग्रीकल्चर में, और जो भी डॉक्यूमेंट्स है उसमें एक स्टैंडर्ड ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर जो बनाया गया उसके बारे में बात करेंगे, और उससे पहले एक पब्लिक नोटिस भी दिया गया। फिर बाद में ये जो ड्रोन्स में कौन सा पेस्टिसाइड कैसा यूज़ करना उसके बारे में एक पब्लिक नोटिस दिया गया। तो मैं ये जो 4 डॉक्यूमेंट्स है, वो डॉक्यूमेंट से उनका उसमें क्या है उसके नहीं है उसके बारे में बात कर रहा हूँ। So I am just speaking about these 4 documents which have been released by Government of India, especially the standard operating procedure. So we made a detailed comments on this SOP which was prepared and released by Government of India. Now, one of the, I think what is the expected role of drones in pesticide application? So all the drone advocates, proponents of drones in agriculture for pesticide spraying, they keep telling us that it will reduce manpower requirement, and it will also reduce the time duration of application. If it takes 1 day for a manual or a ground spraying, drone spraying will reduce it to 1 hour or 2 hours. And they also tell you that it reduces volume of water. So and also chemicals, they say the quantity required for chemicals will also be reduced, and exposure will also be reduced, because the person who ground based spraying, that person is removed, and we have brought a drone in that person's place. So that way they are saying human being exposure is reduced. तो ये ड्रोन एग्रीकल्चर में यूज़ करें तो इसके जो बेनिफिट्स है, उससे जो फ़ायदा है वो बता रहे थे कि ये ड्रोन वाले, एक तो आदमी का ज़रूरी कम होगा, जितना पहले जो ज़्यादा आदमी ज़रूरत है तो अभी कम आदमी की ज़रूरत है। फिर टाइम जो एक दिन में आपको स्प्रेइंग करने का काम 1 घंटे में या 1.5 घंटे में कर सकते हैं। जो पानी का इस्तेमाल होता है, ये पानी का भी इतना पानी कम पानी से ये ड्रोन स्प्रेइंग कर सकते हैं। केमिकल्स भी जो ये जो हजार्डस पेस्टिसाइड्स है, ये इसको भी कम यूज़ करते हैं। इससे पूरा जो एक्सपोजर होता है आदमी को, जो स्प्रेइंग करते करते जो एक्सपोजर होता है वो भी कम होता। तो इससे फ़ायदा है ज़्यादा है बोल के ड्रोन वाले बताते हैं। तो अभी मैं 2019 में मैं एक लेटर लिखा था एडिशनल सेक्रेटरी प्लांट प्रोटेक्शन को, क्योंकि अपना जो इंसेक्टिसाइड एक्ट है, जो लॉ है, उसके मुताबिक एरियल स्प्रेइंग इज बैंड अपना इंडिया में। तो बाहर अमेरिका में, यूरोप में कहीं भी एरियल स्प्रेइंग के बारे में डिफरेंट पाबंदी है, लेकिन अपने पास तो 1968 में एरियल स्प्रेइंग बैन कर चुके हैं। अगर करना है तो उसके लिए एग्जम्पशन लेना पड़ता। तो ये मैं इसके बारे में एक लेटर लिखा था। तो मेरा लेटर लिखने के बाद ही थोड़ा CIBRC एक सर्कुलर इश्यू करा है कि पूरा सेक्रेटरी एग्रीकल्चर और सभी राष्ट्र सरकारों को ये सर्कुलर भेजा गया कि एरियल स्प्रेइंग के लिए अप्रूवल जरूरी है। तो ये आज भी लागू है। ये तो मैं तो 2019 का बात कर रहा हूँ, फिर बाद में ये सर्कुलर भी 2019 में गया, वो 2000 गलती से 2021 लिखा गया। बाद में फिर मैं लेटर लिखता गया, तो ये ड्रोन रूल्स के ऊपर भी मैं कमेंट दिया था। उसमें भी मैं ये एग्जेम्पशन के बारे में मुद्दा उठाया था। So I raised this issue about Indian Insecticide Act, clearly mentioning that aerial spraying is banned unless it is exempted. So CIBRC needs to give exemption under special circumstances. And of course, those circumstances were not defined under rule, but still aerial spraying is banned. So this I wrote to them, and then the secretary CIBRC sent out a circular to every department, and they reminded everyone that there is a need for approval for aerial spraying. I kept on writing this letter because even Ministry of Civil Aviation was giving exemptions to aerial spraying as an experimental case. So they said individual conditional approvals. So that way I wrote, and I also commented on drone rules, which also do not acknowledge this rule under the Insecticide Act. Okay. Can you mute that person? फिर लास्ट ईयर भाई मैं अगस्त में लेटर लिखा था। बाद में ये जो स्टैंडर्ड ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर CIBRC एक बनाया 11 अक्टूबर को रिलीज करें। सो उसके बाद में भी हम लोग कमेंट दिए थे। So every stage I have been commenting and trying to remind the government that aerial spraying is banned in India. But even today, that violation is continued, and even the government of India, and especially Director General of Civil Aviation, they are allowing drones to operate, to spray, despite a law saying there is a ban. I think this we need to note. आज भी केंद्र सरकार के जो भी है वो ड्रोन से एरियल स्प्रेइंग करना बैन है, लेकिन इसको कंसिडरेशन में नहीं ले रहे हैं वो लोग, एंड इलीगली दे आर अलाउ कर रहे हैं कि ड्रोन से स्प्रे करने का। तो जहाँ भी आज भारत में ड्रोन्स के जरिए जो स्प्रेइंग हो रहा है वो इलीगल है, अगर एग्जेम्पशन CIBRC नहीं दिया तो ये CIBRC हम जो मुद्दा उठाने के बाद ये लोग ये स्टैंडर्ड ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर का बात कर रहे हैं, लेकिन ये इसमें जो कमियां हैं मैं आगे बताता हूँ। So I'll speak about the lacunae and weaknesses in the SOP. In fact, how they are trying to circumvent the law which says there is a ban on aerial spraying in India. So the issues, what we have to look at is, one is of course technology. Now technology, type of drone is very, very important. Size of drone is important. Yeah. In the context of pesticide spraying, aerial spraying, nozzles are very, very important, because when the spraying is done through the drone, the nozzle, the quality of the nozzle and its linkage with the kind of pesticide which is being sprayed, and the dilution factor, I think these are all interrelated factors. And then the charging, usually they'll tell you that, as is mentioned, the time will be reduced, but they are not factored in the charging time. Depending on the size of the drone, you need to keep charging it every time. So that is again a big issue. And major issue is which we are raising, drift. Drift is, when the drone is spraying, the pesticide, whatever chemical is sprayed, that drifts because of wind and the speed of the drone. So in fact, it's not only the natural wind. Sometimes because of the drone, the drone, if it is a copter kind, they have 4 kinds of fans moving which lifts the drone. Because of those fans also, the drift can happen. So this drift means it does not go to the targeted area, but it just enters the environment freely. So this issue is one which I've been flagging. Second is security. तो ये टेक्नोलॉजी का इसमें बात करें तो इसमें ड्रोन का साइज जो है वो कितना बड़ा है, वो भी उसे अपने को इसमें उसका स्प्रेइंग में एफिशिएंसी में उसका बारे में बात करना पड़ता है। और टाइप ऑफ ड्रोन भी इसमें बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, क्योंकि तरह तरह का ड्रोन्स है। तो कौन सा ड्रोन एरियल स्प्रेइंग के लिए यूज़ करते हैं, इसके ऊपर अभी भी रिसर्च हो रहा है अमेरिका में। अब चार्जिंग ये लोग बोलते हैं टाइम कम होता, लेकिन साइज के मुताबिक तो चार्जिंग बार बार करना पड़ता। अब ये पे लोड जो लोड लेके जाता उसके ऊपर भी चार्जिंग जल्दी खत्म होता। तो ये चार्जिंग का टाइम ये लोग बताते नहीं। और अहम होता है कि ड्रिफ्ट, टेक्नोलॉजी में क्या आपने को बोलते हैं कि ऊपर से बहुत स्प्रेइंग कर सकते हैं, लेकिन ये हवा में ज़्यादा निकल जाता, क्योंकि जो नेचुरल हवा आते रहता उससे पूरा पेस्टिसाइड जो स्प्रेइंग करते वो लोग हवा में जाता, जो क्रॉप पे आना है वो कम रहता। तो वो एक है। और ड्रोन का ऊपर जो फैंस रहते हैं वो डिपेंडिंग ऑन द टाइप के मुताबिक उससे भी ये ड्रिफ्ट बढ़ने का आशंका है। अब सिक्योरिटी के बारे में बात करें तो सिक्योरिटी बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है। तो अमेरिका में हर जगह जहाँ भी है ड्रोन से सिक्योरिटी प्रॉब्लम है। क्यों टेररिज्म तो हमें मालूम है। अब पाकिस्तान के ड्रोन्स तो जम्मू कश्मीर में कई बार दिखा हुआ है। और ये जो भी ड्रोन एयरक्राफ्ट या एयरपोर्ट्स के उसमें इंटरफियर हो सकता है, ऐसे एक सिक्योरिटी है। अब इसमें हम बात कर रहे हैं कि क्रैश जो होता है, क्रैश हो सकता है क्योंकि ड्रोन्स गिर सकता है, कंट्रोल खो के वो गिर सकता है। अभी पिछले साल अगस्त 15 को मध्य प्रदेश में जो अगस्त 15 को वो समारोह हो रहा था तो एक ड्रोन गिर के वहाँ के जो कलाकारों के ऊपर गिर गया, फिर एक दो लोगों को चोट भी आया। तो ड्रोन्स क्रैश होते रहते। अब ये जब भी होता है उससे सर के ऊपर गिर गया, जो भी मर गया, ये भी बहुत समस्या है। तो अगर ये इसमें पेस्टिसाइड है तो पेस्टिसाइड का डब्बा के साथ क्रैश हुआ तो पेस्टिसाइड जहाँ भी गिरा उसे फिर मुश्किल बढ़ सकता है। So the security angle, we talk about terrorism or threat to national security, but the other security issues, the crashes, drone crashes keep happening if they don't do proper maintenance or there are issues with the drone technology or the type of the drone. And if this crash happens, depending on where it happens, how it happens, it could lead to human loss of life. And if it is happening with the payload of a hazardous pesticide, and if it happens in inappropriate location, I think that will be a very dangerous and hazardous situation. So that is another factor. Then safety, biosafety, of course, we are talking when the spraying happens, it enters the environment and it can harm birds, it can harm the surrounding biodiversity, it can harm crops which are neighboring crops because the drift is always there. So unintended and non-targeted spraying can happen and that leads to safety issues. तो ये जो हवा में ऊपर से जो स्प्रेइंग करने से या पक्षी पशु किसी को भी इससे इसको प्रभाव हो सकता है। और क्रॉप जो है वो नाइबरिंग क्रॉप जो आजू बाजू के क्रॉप के ऊपर भी ये जा सकता है। तो ये सेफ्टी इशू भी बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है। अब एक्सेप्टेंस एक इशू है, इसमें कॉस्ट के बारे में हम बात कर रहे हैं। कॉस्ट अभी सरकार इसलिए तो सब्सिडी दे रहे हैं, सब्सिडी से दे वांट टू इंक्रीज द एक्सेप्टेंस। अभी इंटरफेरेंस जो है क्योंकि अब ड्रोन किसके हाथ में है उससे जो आवाज़ आता है, नहीं तो उसे जो आजू बाजू वालों का काम में दखल अंदाजी हो सकता है, ये बुरा हो सकता है। फिर अभी ड्रोन एरियल स्प्रेइंग का मतलब है मोनोकल्चर ज़्यादा होना पड़ता है, क्योंकि एक पेस्टिसाइड लेके स्प्रेइंग करना है तो मिक्सड फार्मिंग नहीं हो सकता है, तो मोनोकल्चर में ही। तो ये मोनोकल्चर को एक्सेप्टेंस बढ़ाने का एक अलग तरीका का टेक्नोलॉजी हमारे को लगता है। मार्जिनल लैंड होल्डिंग भारत में तो बहुत छोटे छोटे लैंड होल्डिंग्स, आधा एकड़, पाव एकड़, 1.5 एकड़, ऐसा बहुत छोटे लैंड होल्डिंग्स हैं। अब ये लोग बोलते हैं कि अब छोटा है तो और अच्छा बोलते हैं, लेकिन दे कॉस्ट और इस स्प्रेइंग मेथड और अपना जो एग्रीकल्चर है इससे वो जुड़ता नहीं. So acceptance is a serious issue because of the cost and the interference, because it interferes with other activities which keep happening in Indian villages. And of course, it perpetuates a monoculture because, mixed farming and then pesticide spraying cannot happen. And of course, India has a lot of marginal land holdings of half acre or less than half acre. So I think these kind of farming will have problems in accepting this drone technology. And privacy is a big issue. Privacy in farming, because each farmer would like to do the way they want to do farming, but when you want to do drone aerial spraying, this can interfere with that kind of farming. That's why government is encouraging cluster-based farming, so that they can use the same one kind of seed. They want to use the same kind of technology. So government is trying to push this kind of technology which does not allow the farmer to decide what they want to do or they would like to do. And of course, individual privacy is also affected because drones keep moving around with a camera overhead. And Indian villages, we are all open, and a lot of activities are done in the open in the villages. Even before aerial spraying technology by drones has been introduced, camera-based drones have started playing havoc in the Indian villages and urban areas where people are being filmed while they are taking bath, or even their homes have been taken photographs. So a lot of the privacy issues are also coming up, and pesticide drones, pesticide spraying drones are also going to raise those issues. तो ये प्राइवेसी जो एक आदमी अपना जो काम करने का इसमें ये दखल अंदाजी ऊपर से ये कैमरा लेके आता है ड्रोन, इससे भी एक अपना गांव में जो जहां हम बहुत ओपन खुल्लम खुल्ला काम करते रहते हैं, तो ये कैमरा लेके ड्रोन निकलता है, तो इससे अपना प्रत्येक व्यक्ति का जो प्राइवेसी है उसके ऊपर भी इसका प्रभाव हो सकता है. अब लीगल इश्यू तो है. लीगल क्या है, अगर मैं जैसा ड्रोन से पेस्टिसाइड स्प्रेइंग हो रहा है, अब ये हेर्बिसाइड स्प्रेइंग है, लेकिन ये हेर्बिसाइड टॉलरेंट कॉटन नहीं है तो और क्रॉप मर जाता है, और ये आजू बाजू का किसान ये इस्तेमाल करे तो वो ड्रिफ्ट से इसका बाजू का किसान का क्रॉप मर गया, तो उसका जो लायबिलिटी जो इसका जिम्मेदारी कौन है? Who is going to be liable for a non-target spraying and the impact? Because sometimes India does not have herbicide tolerant crops. So if someone is using herbicide on a herbicide tolerant cotton, and it affects the neighboring farm and the farmer loses the crop and it burns the crop, who is going to pay the liability? Who is the liability? So, and then the guarantee, what is the guarantee that this drone spraying will protect the crops? We have seen seed, in the case of seed, there is no guarantee, and farmers, whenever they raise the question of quality, there is no compensation for them. Similarly, this technology which is being pushed, who is going to guarantee the returns from that technology? And accountability, of course, there is no accountability. That we are going to discuss in the next SOP. So there are a lot of legal issues which are still in the open, and the government has not responded when we raised these objections on this. So the SOP itself is actually almost a 37-page document, but actual SOP, standard operating procedure, is only 5 pages, and within that, I think only 5 or 6 regulations which are important because they try to give some procedure for the farmers. Basically, it does not name any group or name any individual to whom this SOP is being recommended to. So whether it is saying who takes responsibility for this procedure to be implemented, I think that is not at all given in this. But I know the ministry is trying to tell us that by developing this SOP, they are responding to the Insecticide Act exemption. Under the Insecticide Act, they are giving exemption based on this SOP. So I think this is not proper, and in fact, SOP itself is a lot of lacuna are there. I have given at least a 20-page comment on this SOP. So one is the marking of the area. Whenever the spraying is done, they say the operator has to geofence it. So geofencing means I think the drone has to be calibrated to operate in the given area. And then they talk of buffer zone. But there is no definition of buffer zone. There is no standard parameter how much this buffer zone has to be and why the buffer zone. So what is this buffer zone and why the buffer zone? So there are a number of details which are lacking. So when you are talking of Indian context, where the 5-acre, even 10-acre farmer, if at all they are going to use their drone, this geofencing means what is the buffer zone in a 10-acre farm? Are they saying it is just a percentage of the 10-acre farm, or all the border, 1 meter by 1 meter or something, some kind of parameters? All these are not given, and they leave it to the drone operator. The drone operators, they completely are oblivious to pesticides and farming. They know only how to operate the drones. But the responsibility of geofencing, buffer zone is all given to the operators. The operators shall use only approved insecticides. Now this again, gives a leverage of over the farmer. Instead of farmer deciding what kind of pesticide they can use depending on their experience, now they are saying operator will use approved insecticide. So this is where I think again the farmer's sovereignty is taken away. And you can see this word, washing decontamination. So I said, what is this word, washing decontamination? And first aid facilities shall be provided by authority. So this word itself is very vague. I mean, if it is saying washing, decontamination, so washing what and what is decontamination? Decontamination of what is again undefined. So is it about decontaminating the drone or the area or the buffer zone? I think again the vague language is used here. Animals and persons not connected with operations shall be prevented from entering such areas for a specific period. So they are saying that if a drone operator comes and starts a drone aerial spraying, the animals or persons will not be allowed to enter into that area. Now again in a rural context, Indian rural context, how this is possible is again a big question, because most of the times, villagers or animals, they keep moving through the fields because they have to reach their field, or they have to go to their grazing area. So how long will they prevent it? If they are going by the labeling, with, which says a particular pesticide says no one should enter that area until 15 days or 10 days. There's a period for each of the highly hazardous pesticides. So again, there is no congruence between this labeling and this SOP which says it should be prevented. सॉरी, हिंदी में बताने का, ये जो ड्रोन ऑपरेटर आया तो जो स्प्रेइंग करने हवा में कितना स्प्रेइंग करने का जो एरिया है, वो एरिया बफर जोन के बारे में बात करता है, लेकिन वो बफर जोन कैसा, कौन करता है, कितना है। अब हम 5 एकड़ का एक जमीन लिया तो 5 एकड़ में बफर जोन कितना रहता है, क्योंकि किसान हर जगह यील्ड के लिए हर जगह प्लांट लगाता है। हम देखे कि बीटी कॉटन में वो बफर जोन निकाल दिए, तो बफर क्रॉप, तो ये बफर जोन कितना होगा, ये बफर जोन से क्या प्रिवेंट हो सकता है, ये इसमें के बारे में कुछ भी जानकारी SOP में नहीं है। तो और ये डिकंटामिनेशन पूरा ऑपरेटर्स करना बोले। हालांकि जो ड्राफ्ट SOP में अगर कुछ इमरजेंसी है तो इमरजेंसी का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ड्रोन ऑपरेटर्स पे लगाया गया था, लेकिन वो क्लास को निकाल दिया फाइनल नोटिफिकेशन। सो आई डोंट नो व्हाई द इमरजेंसी प्लान्स, और whenever there is a crash or whenever there is a pesticide poisoning, I think these are all emergencies, and there was a clause which says that's a responsibility of the operators, but then that was removed probably because of pressure from the drone companies or pesticide companies. So who is responsible again is not there. और जो स्प्रेइंग करते टाइम जो एरिया है उसमें जानवर को और दूसरे बाहर के आदमियों को अंदर मना करना, आने के लिए मना करना बोल के ये बताते हैं, लेकिन वो कैसा करते हैं, कितना देर के लिए करते हैं, क्योंकि गांव में लोग आते जाते रहते अपना खेती के लिए, इसका खेती से जाते रहते, तो ये पूरा कैसा करते, कौन करेगा, ये पूरा एक हेजी सिचुएशन में है। And this is a very, very important. They say all aerial operations shall be notified to the public not less than 24 hours in advance through competent authorities. And next one, it says written intimation has to be given to Gram Panchayat and Panchayat Samiti. Now Panchayat Samiti, Panchayat इनका मुताबिक पंचायत को ये ड्रोन ऑपरेटर एक खत लिख दिया, एंड वो 24 घंटे में जहाँ भी ड्रोन स्प्रेइंग हो रहा है उसको वो एरिया में लोग नहीं जाने के लिए एक ऐलान करने का। तो ये ऐलान ग्राम पंचायत करेगा 24 घंटे में देना। मैं बोल रहा था ये एक हफ्ता तो भी समय देना था, not just 24 hours. So this is again a major issue, because Gram Panchayats have not been empowered to prevent or to regulate drone operators. So without, here it is merely trying to create a post office kind of role for Gram Panchayat. So they merely have to transmit the written intimation from the drone operator to the people. So that kind of role is not going to be helpful, and it's not possible also because Gram Panchayat do not have resources to intimate within 24 hours. They usually do through a person who goes around using traditional technology of shout out, but otherwise Gram Panchayat can't do. तो ये ट्रेनिंग जो पायलट्स को ट्रेनिंग है इसके लिए डीजीसीए ट्रेनिंग दे रहा है, लेकिन ये ट्रेनिंग के बारे में क्या ट्रेनिंग देगा, कौन ट्रेनिंग देगा, इसमें डिटेल नहीं है। अभी जो हो रहा है, डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ सिविल एविएशन एक ऑनलाइन ट्रेनिंग दे रहे हैं, उसमें पेस्टिसाइड्स के बारे में है या नहीं है मुझे पता नहीं, लेकिन अब डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ सिविल एविएशन का ट्रेनिंग बोले तो उसमें ये नहीं होगा क्योंकि उनको भी पता नहीं। तो ये पायलट जो है जो ड्रोन ऑपरेट करता है, ये इंसेक्टिसाइड्स को कब समझता है, कैसा समझता है, ये क्योंकि यहाँ प्रोडक्ट जो डीलिंग हो रहा है ये इंसेक्टिसाइड पेस्टिसाइड है, बहुत हजार्डस पेस्टिसाइड है। तो इसके बारे में भी पहले जो था वो निकाल दिए और उसमें ये डाइल्यूशन हो गया। सो इसमें as I mentioned, there is no oversight mechanism because CIBRC is in Delhi. It does not have any mechanism in states or across India. They have not identified any other agency through which they want to implement this SOP. And importantly, the title says this standard operating procedure includes forests, non-cropped areas and more, plus etc. Again, Central Insecticide Board is related to insecticides and it works under Insecticide Act 1968. But forest, non-crop areas do not come under the jurisdiction of Central Insecticide Board. Yet, they have issued a SOP for forests as well. So invariably we can see that government intends to use drones everywhere, not only crops, not only agriculture fields, but everywhere, forests, non-crop areas, and anywhere. So it could be urban areas, it could be residential areas, anywhere they can use it using this standard operating procedure, which is again a serious violation. तो मैं बता रहा था कि यहाँ जो ये डॉक्यूमेंट में लिखाया गया है कि ये सिर्फ खेत में नहीं लेकिन फॉरेस्ट में भी यूज़ करते हैं, वन में भी और नॉन क्रॉप्ड एरिया जहाँ भी खेत नहीं है वहाँ भी यूज़ करते हैं और कहीं भी एक्सेट्रा बोल के लिखा हुआ है, माने कहीं भी इसका यूज़ कर सकते हैं। पूरा भारत में कहीं भी रेजिडेंशियल एरिया हो सकता है, गांव में हो सकता है या गली में हो सकता है, कहीं भी यूज़ कर सकते हैं। या ऐसा लैंग्वेज लिखने से हमें पता होता है कि सरकार इसके बारे में बहुत गहराई से सोच नहीं किया है, सिर्फ कंपनी और ड्रोन्स के लिए ये SOP बनाया गया है और हम जो मुद्दा उठा रहे हैं उसको एक डाइवर्शन के लिए SOP बनाया गया। अब इसमें और एक है SOP बनाते ये ड्रोन इंडस्ट्री के साथ बैठ के ये बनाया गया। यहाँ 10 एक्सपर्ट्स ड्रोन इंडस्ट्री और पेस्टिसाइड इंडस्ट्री के उनके साथ बैठ के SOP बनाए गए। ये जो फायदामंद है ये SOP बनाया तो वो लोग फायदा होंगे, लेकिन इसमें किसान या किसान संगठन किसी को भी बुलाया नहीं गया और उनसे भी बात हुआ ही नहीं। तो इससे मतलब है कि ड्रोन बिजनेस बढ़ाने के लिए सरकार का नीति आया, लेकिन ये किसान के लिए, किसान के हित में नहीं लाया गया। So this was not brought basically to help farmers, but to help drone industry, and that's where conflict of interest is there. At least 10 experts, so-called experts from drone industry and pesticide industry were constantly consulted when this SOP was developed. But farmers or farmer organizations or NGOs like us, the research organizations, none of them have been consulted on this. And basically, when they say standard, there is no standard in this because the word they keep using is appropriate. So nowhere there are standards within this document. Even though it says standard operating procedures, there is nothing standard in this. So प्रामाणिकता जो बात कर रहे हैं इसमें, यहाँ एक भी प्रमाण के बारे में बात नहीं है. अप्रोप्रिएट का शब्द बहुत यूज हुआ. अप्रोप्रिएट माने जहाँ लोकल में ड्रोन ऑपरेटर अपना मन से अपना हिस्से से जो बनाता है वो अप्रोप्रिएट हो गया. तो ये जो रिसर्च के बात हो रहा था, ये पूरा अपने को इसमें वो रिसर्च का फायदा इसमें आया बोल के अपने को समझ में नहीं आता. Fixing the level of parameters, even this was done now, SOP, but it does not mention over next 5 years we will develop these are the parameters, they will try to fix this. Even that is not done. So they give that the language is as if this is a permanent document for drone operators. So the biggest thing is I keep mentioning drone crash. Drone crash is a reality. It's not a rare event. It keeps happening and it can happen anytime and every time. And wherever it happens, we are not sure what kind of impacts. It can lead to Bhopal gas tragedy kind of tragedies as well, because it depends, if the drone with a payload capacity of 20 liters crashes with a highly hazardous pesticides and the fumes spread if those fumes spread and the vapor spread, maybe people are going to be affected severely. So it all depends where it crashes and how it crashes. So drone crash is a reality, but this SOP does not even mention how to deal with those regular happenings. These are not emergencies, these are regular happenings. Drift is, of course, a continuous hazard, and of course, there is nothing on drift as well. So they approved pesticide, 477 pesticides have been approved for usage on drones. And this notification came in April. So our team tried to analyze this. So we can see 253 formulations which have been approved. They have single active ingredient. And 139 formulations have more than one active ingredient. And of course, a few biopesticides have been identified. तो ये ड्रोन के जरिए जो स्प्रेइंग होना है उसमें 477 फार्मुलेशंस को गवर्नमेंट नोटिफाई किया है. ये बोलते हैं कि ये फार्मुलेशंस इसमें यूज़ करना है. तो उसमें एक्टिव इंग्रेडिएंट्स के बारे में हम लोग थोड़ा एनालिसिस करें. हाईली हजार्डस पेस्टिसाइड एनालिसिस भी हम लोग किए. तो 477 में 134 जो है दे क्वालिफाई फॉर हाईली हजार्ड, क्योंकि इसे बहुत ज़्यादा विष स्प्रेड होता है. सो ये 134 प्लस 80 ये एक्टिव नंबर ऑफ एक्टिव इंग्रेडिएंट्स. इसमें जो फार्मुलेशंस में जो और भी मटेरियल मिला हुआ रहता है वो भी हजार्डस है. So 134 and 80, I think together these almost 200 plus are very highly hazardous pesticides have been identified for drone-based spraying. And you can see 19 pesticides, active ingredients which were banned in other countries, they are also approved. And 28 formulations which are banned in other countries, they are also approved. तो हम देख सकते हैं कि 50 से कम फॉर्मुलेशन जहाँ और दूसरे देश में बैन हुआ है वो यहाँ पर अप्रूवल दिया गया है. तो ये हाईली हजार्डस पेस्टिसाइड ड्रोन स्प्रेइंग से हमारा जो भारत में जो ग्रामीण प्रांत में जो अभी जो समस्या हो रहा है उसका दुगना तिगुना बढ़ने का परिस्थिति आता है बिकॉज ऑफ ड्रोन स्प्रेइंग. अब ये हम लोग ये वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का क्लासिफिकेशन एनालिसिस भी किया है. वो लोग क्लास 1B, क्लास 2, even that has been done. So highest you can see क्लास 2 में जो पेस्टिसाइड्स है उसका अप्रूवल यहाँ पर हम देख सकते हैं. सो मैं अभी बहुत कुछ मुद्दे शायद टाइम भी नहीं है, शायद डिस्कशन में हम ज़्यादा बात करेंगे. सो मेरा पहला प्रश्न था कि ये सरकार इतने जल्दी से क्यों काम कर रहा है, क्यों 2 साल में ये होना है, इसके लिए टाइम क्यों नहीं लेना है. एंड अभी जो रेगुलेशन लाए ये सही है क्या, आई थिंक ये हम लोग पूछना पड़ता, हम अभी पूछ रहे हैं. और ये ड्रोन बेस्ड एरियल स्प्रेइंग से जो पानी है, जो तालाब है, जो नदी है, जो कुआं है, ये पूरा कंटामिनेशन होने का परिस्थिति भी है. और हालांकि जो जैविक खेती करते हैं उनका भी खेत में ये ड्रिफ्ट से कंटामिनेशन हो सकता है. तो ये ड्रोन एरियल स्प्रेइंग क्यों इतना हरी भरी में सरकार ला रहे हैं, ये इसके बारे में पूछना. अगर रिसर्च करना है, अब आप देख सकते हैं कि एसओपी में डेटा कलेक्शन का बात है. सो नाउ दे आर कलेक्टिंग डेटा on efficiency and efficacy of a drone-based aerial spraying. So this is like an experiment. If it is an experiment at the cost of farmers and at the cost of environment, why can't they do it in a field which is a regulated field instead of releasing it across the country and doing a open trial of research? I think this is again a question which we need to ask. And of course, as I mentioned, it is completely illegal. Right now, what central government is doing in India is illegal because even today, aerial spraying requires exemption under exceptional circumstances from CABRC. And CABRC has not responded when we raised a question on this. So I think I'll speak if there are any other questions, and thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy, for this very detailed presentation on problems on SOPs and other issues. Maybe if the participant has questions, they can share that in the chat and we will address them during open forum. Now I invite our second speaker, Dr. P. Indira Devi. She was a professor of Kerala Agriculture University at Agriculture Economics and also director of research there. And currently she is enjoying the position of ICAR Emeritus Professor status. She's a member in several professional bodies and serves in the editorial board as well as a reviewer of reputed scientific journals and has published several research papers in reputed journals and books. Apart from contributions to the academic world, she has also been an active member of civil society and author for writing for local and national print media, commenting on economic and social policy and environmental concerns. May I invite Dr. Indira Devi to present, and may I also request to limit your presentation to 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilip, for introducing me. And certainly I may take only 10 minutes or rather maximum 12 minutes because most of the points have already been introduced by the earlier speaker. So I think I'll just give a snapshot of how the chemical pesticide use in agriculture is being seen in the country for the past decade. And the blue line is the insecticide use, the red one is the fungicide, and the gray one is the weedicides. And generally, if you look at the trend, we can see that it is slowly on the declining mode. But be careful with that statement. We need to have a very detailed chemical-wise analysis to see whether which chemicals are increasing or which chemicals are decreasing, one side. And also there are possibilities that more harmful chemicals, more dangerous chemical use is increasing. Then there is also the possibility that some of the new generation chemicals which need to be applied only in very small quantities.
Excuse me, teacher.
Yeah.
If you have a presentation, I think you forgot to share that.
Oh, okay. I think, okay. Yeah, can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, please make it.
I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah. So I was saying that this declining trend is nothing to be happy about, perhaps, because we need a more detailed analysis to see whether the harmful chemical proportion is increasing or whether those chemicals which need to be used in very small quantities are increasing or decreasing. So it doesn't make any sense to conclude that a declining trend is something to be happy about at all. We need a very detailed analysis, but this gives a very general indication that it is on the decline.
Teacher, excuse me, can you make it full screen? Thank you.
But if you look at, I just collected the data on the cost of insecticides across the states of India. It is based on the report of the cost of cultivation studies by the Commission on Agriculture Cost and Prices. So if you look at the two graphs, you can see that in most of the cases, the cost on insecticides is increasing. The blue graph is for 2014-15, and the orange one is for 18-19. So even during a very short span of time, there is an increase in cost of insecticides at farm level. This is at per hectare level. That is what the farmer incurs. So invariably, what I am trying to say is that, and of course, this figure shows the proportion of different crops in the share of total pesticide consumption. And as all of us know, the cereal crops consume a very large share, followed by vegetables, pulses, oil seeds, etc., etc. So what I was trying to say is that we know that there is an increasing level of cost on pest management investments, which include the cost of the chemical as well as the application charges. And some of the earlier studies which I did in Kerala condition showed that sometimes it is even the cost of the chemical is something between 40 to 45%. And the rest is the application charges. Of course, in Kerala, the labor wage rates are relatively higher compared to the rest of India. But as in the case of other sectors of agricultural operations, like transplanting or harvesting, we know that mechanization has been a very rapid move across the states of India because the labor availability in agriculture is on the decline and corresponding increase in wages. So the labor cost alone consumes a substantial share, and also the share of family labor in agriculture sector is also coming down. So naturally, we may have to opt for mechanization in all the sectors. And one of the papers I was reading says that the global annual growth of application of unmanned aerial systems, that is the drones, is as high as 85 to 92%. And I do believe that this will be true because the pace of mechanization in pesticide application will also be on the very high rate. So this is something which we have to understand and acknowledge, or we have to face the fact that people will be going behind the drones. And there are several advantages that the media as well as even the scientific community highlight, and some of them are true perhaps, even though personally I'm apprehensive about some of the claims. Faster, we all agree. I'm not taking too much of time explaining everyone because these things have already been explained. Cost effectiveness, I'm a little bit apprehensive because I haven't come across any field level study which was properly conducted to compare the cost effectiveness between manual and drones. So I am, even though that claim is made at different levels, I'm little bit, I cross my hands at this point of for this statement. And all the other statements, it is true. The exposure of the applicator, I underline the word applicator, to the chemical is avoided. It is confined to, even if you really require, it can be confined to infected areas alone. Technically, that is correct. And it avoids crop damage due to human intervention at the field. And technically, it is possible to have a uniform spray and increased efficiency. But we at Agriculture University did some preliminary studies 3 years back to understand the technicalities of application of drone in spraying of not chemicals but other microbial formulations as well as micronutrient formulations. So some of the basic apprehensions or some of the areas which we found worth researching further is that the drift is highly influenced by of course, the wind velocity, then height at which the spraying is done, and the nozzle type of the drone. So I understand that there are 2-3 types of drones, and the nozzle types also differ between them. So it's the nozzle type that primarily decides the droplet size. So there is variability between the drones in the droplet size. So basically the wind velocity, height of spray, that activity, and the nozzle type decides the drift. We were very much concerned about the drift because all of you know that Kerala is a densely populated state, and our demarcation between the farmed areas and human settlements are very thin, or rather there is no demarcation perhaps, and it is a continuous stretch of water bodies. So the chances of drift and externalities, that is damage to or pollution to the water bodies throughout Kerala, because most of these water bodies are interconnected as well. And also the drift to human settlements, neighboring population, and the ecosystem as a whole. So these concerns are to be properly addressed. So we were really apprehensive, our research team. So we suggested that at that point of time, we gave the recommendation to the Department of Agriculture that time being, we confine the use of drones only for the application of micronutrient sprays as well as microbial formulations. And let us restrict the application to chemical. We are not recommending chemical pesticides at that point of time. That was our recommendation at that point of time. So here, further we are continuing with these research on these aspects. And actually, it's a little bit expensive, as all of you know, but still, we find it a little bit difficult to adjust these three factors to arrive at a particular standard protocol or a prescription with respect to a particular chemical for a particular crop. Because we know that even though there are what is known as label claims for chemical pesticides, at ground level, these strictly following these chemical choice is not there. So even if we are restricting our analysis or our research on label claim chemicals alone, even then at a field level, it may not be strictly followed. And we are really concerned about all those aspects. But these are certain very fundamental things that we have to find answers to through proper research. And regarding water also, our standard recommendation is 100 liters per hectare if it is in the case of these traditional knapsack sprayers or human man-managed containers. But again, with respect to drones, it varies with the height and speed of spray. So that also poses difficulties in fixing the level of concentration of the spray fluid. So we have to specify the speed, we have to specify the height, we have to specify the nozzle and the chemical and the crop. And we may also have to prescribe the wind velocity measurement. So this is a very complex situation. I'm not saying that this is not something that we cannot find an answer to, but this is a little bit tricky or rather very complex situation. And again, the cost economy or the economics, I am not making a statement right now because I would like to get very specific field level studies to come up with a conclusion in this regard, because in Kerala right now I don't find much difference between the hiring charges between these manual as well as the drone, but of course there may be savings in the chemical, which I think we have to find out through field level studies. So when I say that KU prescribes only application of bio inputs, and all our KVKs are also sticking on to this prescription right now, and only for paddy. But right now, as has already been indicated by my former speaker, there is already an SOP, a central directive, and most of the protocols or prescriptions are not standardized. And we do not have a very proper monitoring mechanism in pesticide sale or use or disposal or whatever it is. So right now it is confined to the paddy fields, which is wetland paddy in most of the cases. So the chances of water bodies getting contaminated is very high. That is one concern. The second, perhaps more serious concern, or rather equally bad instance, is that of the use of drones in plantation sector in Kerala or in most of the South Indian states or northeastern states. Plantation crops like tea, coffee. In tea, I think they have already started some initial things. Coffee also it is possible, but I don't know. Then it may be extended to rubber or even coconut or all those plantations wherein the impact, I mean the negative impacts will be more pronounced. And because most of these crops, especially tea, coffee, cardamom, black pepper, all those things are grown in the very fragile ecosystems. And when we are talking about, again, this point was already mentioned, like there's no training as to these formal training in crop management to these operators of drones. Most of them, I understand, are technically trained on operating the drone. They have no exposure to the crop management protocols or even the environmental science. So I'm just restricting my presentation with some suggestions because I think it is better for us to accept the mechanization and use of drones for many other purposes, which we do welcome. But with respect to the application, pesticide application matter, we should have a research, a very detailed research for standardization of the protocol with respect to the type of the drone, height, nozzle type, dose of the chemical, crop, chemicals, and one more point was that the speed of the equipment while spraying. Until then, it is ideal or it is safe to restrict the use to the spraying of bio inputs and botanicals. That is one suggestion. Then the second one is that these operators are to be given some formal training, certificate courses, and may be declared as certified pesticide operators. So that I think these things can be included in the new pesticide management bill. And these certified pesticide operators there are certain duties, responsibilities, as well as they will also be liable for the damages. And it is also advisable to have a formal sanction from local agricultural officer. I know that there is some suggestion on these lines in the SOP, but the monitoring is also to be made compulsory. The local agricultural officer should be there to monitor. He can or she can also entrust some of her junior officers who are also technically trained, but the responsibility rests with the local agriculture officer. Then the third one is that we should have monitoring studies to see what is the drift, what can be the long-term effects of drone application in the pesticide application sector. What is the extent of pollution in air pollution, water pollution, and also the residue levels in the animals, the livestock, and also human health effects. So these are some suggestions. While we accept the mechanization in a very important sector, these are very serious concerns which we have to address. And some of these concerns are equally applicable to the existing situation where the whole application is unmonitored. See, and even some of the concerns which I have raised regarding those and all, still it is there when we are using the manual operators, manual sprayers. But here the chances of impact can be much more due to the drift factor. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, teacher, for this wonderful presentation highlighting the field level challenges of using drones, its practical issues, gaps in research and monitoring as well. So, thank you so much for presenting. And now I invite the third speaker, Ms. Sarojini Rangam, for presenting. And may I introduce her? Ms. Sarojini Rangam is a zoologist by education and is the executive director of Pesticide Action Network Asia Pacific, which is a regional organization working for a more sustainable farming systems, including the elimination of pesticides, and advocate for agroecology. It also works towards advancing food sovereignty and strengthening people's and especially rural women's movements in their assertion of right to land, resource, and livelihoods. Ms. Rangam is also one of the initiators and a committee member of the Asian Rural Women's Coalition, the People's Coalition for Food Sovereignty, and chair of IBOM International. May I request Sarojini Rangam to take the floor.
Thank you, Dilip, for the introduction. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, please make it bigger.
Yeah, sure. Is that better? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you Pan India for the invitation to this very interesting webinar. And what I also wanted to start off is to look at the pesticide situation at the global level and some of the documentation that we've done very quickly before I go into the impact of drone technology on human health and the environment. We know that the global pesticide use has doubled in the last 20 years, and it's now 60 billion in 2020. And about 2 million tons of pesticides are utilized annually worldwide, but they're expected to increase to 3.5 million tons by the year 2020. So now this is a bit old because they're just compiling the information now. China is the major country, followed by the US and Argentina in terms of pesticide use, but Asia is also increasing. Most are herbicides, followed by insecticide 30%, fungicide 18%, and other types such as rodenticides and nematicides. Demand is increasing in many developing countries, which together account for a quarter of the global pesticide use. Okay. I just also wanted to touch base on looking at the pesticide poisoning. We have an estimated 385 million cases of acute unintentional poisonings every year, mainly occupational, and these include 11,000 deaths. But although they are linked to an increase in chronic disease, these numbers do not include chronic disease, which are cancers, development disorders, and reproductive problems. And this number of 385 million cases of poisonings is a huge increase from the estimated 25 million cases reported in 1990 by WHO. So no one has actually done this, and so PAN and scientists from the PAN network actually pull this together, and the report is available where they actually systematically looked at the documentation available in many countries. There's also the environmental impacts of pesticides. So you find that declining bee population, it's pose a threat to global agriculture. With the pesticide, we are seeing the bee populations major important pollinators under threat. And if you look at it, one treated corn seed contains enough neonicotinoids to kill 80,000 honeybees. And that's, we are basically destroying our environment, our pollinators. Bird populations have declined 20 to 25% because of pesticides. There's a loss of biodiversity, 75% loss of flying insects, waterways, massive contamination and loss of aquatic life, contamination of soil and loss of soil biodiversity. And what is happening is ecosystem disruption. And so we lose a lot of very important aspects of predators and biological controls, ecobalance, and often that is because of the pesticides that we use in food and agriculture production. Children and pesticides, we have 108 million children engaged in agricultural work globally, and they regularly work in the fields during or following the spring season when levels of pesticide residues are high. 4 to 5 times the amount of toxins from a given source is absorbed by children compared to adults. And in August 2016, the Special Rapporteur on Toxic Buzzcode, Tunchak, issued a report describing the silent pandemic of disability and disease associated with childhood exposure to toxics and pollution, and explaining the obligations of states and the responsibilities of business enterprises to protect against such exposure. So children are also much affected, and if you look at the chronic effects, they are there's a lot of documentation showing that children's health and intelligence is being affected badly in terms of their pesticide exposure. Then we have the double standards. So this is very rampant at the country level and with big transnational corporations. Recently, PAN Germany found that Germany exported 9 pesticides which are not approved for use in the EU, including the pesticide cyanamide, acetochlor, and tepraloxidine, which are listed by the EU as carcinogenic and toxic to reproduction. And it also exported, tons and tons of pesticide ingredients, including inert gases. So this is what's happening, that still the dumping of pesticides from the north, from developed countries to the developing countries is still happening. And we can see that some of the big companies, Syngenta, for example, have 51 of the 122 pesticide active ingredients which are not authorized for use in its home country being exported. So the double standards continue to be a major problem, and we are also finding that as the restrictions and the regulations are tightened in terms of double standards, the dumping, the exports of banned pesticides, the companies are now moving their operations elsewhere. Particularly, they're exporting active ingredients, and not the formulations, so that it can be formulated elsewhere. There are some loopholes in the French regulations, which is stopping the double standards, but it allows the continued exports of active ingredients, but not the formulation. So they are using the loopholes to move operations elsewhere. So this is the normal, use of pesticides in Asia. It goes everywhere, and this is the reality of what's happening on the ground. And then who profits? In terms of pesticides, we have the top 4 pesticide companies that control 70% of the market of pesticides. And those are Bayer, Syngenta, Corteva, and BSF. So basically Bayer bought over Monsanto, and Corteva is the merger of Dow and DuPont, the two big US corporations, pesticide corporations. But the same companies are also controlling the commercial seed market, which is the top four, controlling 67% of the commercial seed market globally. And you can see that the control and the consolidation and the mergers are continuing with less corporations at the top in terms of the market shares in agriculture and food sector. Use of drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, according to the industry, and some of you, the previous panelists have talked about this. According to the industry and proponents of drones, drone technology, it's supposed to reduce operator exposure compared to knapsack spraying applications, and it's supposed to be precise application. But none of this is confirmed, but we know there are major issues, and some of it has been shared already, but I just want to emphasize some of these human and environmental impacts. In terms of human health impacts, the OECD did a report evaluating drone technology and the impacts, and one study that they looked at showed external residues on drones were 5 times higher compared to an air assisted sprayer. It looks like this, the air assisted spraying, but it's what they use in monocultures, as Dr. Reddy mentioned, and this continues to be a major problem in terms of drone technology, because the residues stay in the drone and the operator exposure is higher. This is also because they use higher concentration of pesticide solutions in drones. And so the operator exposure or the worker exposure covers both mixing, loading, and maintaining, cleaning, and transport. All of that in terms of the drone technology. So the drones have high residues, and so workers working with drones will be increasingly exposed. Then we have the bystander exposure, and this is also quite a major concern, as again, the use of more concentrated spray applications, and you're talking about huge hectares of application that takes place with the drone technology. And the spray qualities, which are very fine, also increases the risk of airborne drift. And I think the previous panelists talked about this. But what is also a major problem is that we know pesticides are a major problem and can be harmful even at low concentrations. So even exposure at very low concentrations can be harmful to the environment and human health, particularly in children and pregnant women, because that's the time when the fetus is growing and and need to be very much protected. So children and pregnant women are really at risk. And then there's also dietary exposures, and very few. When I was looking at the researching on this drone technology, one of the major problems was that there was hardly any information about dietary exposures. What happens, in terms of residues in the crops, especially the food crops or even fodder, which then gets fed to animals. Then we have the impact on the environment, the damage to sensitive crops, because some crops get damaged very easily. It affects natural enemies of pests, and the whole integrated pest management and farmer field schools that have been very important for in the 90s and until recently. This was a very important aspect of training farmers to understand the ecology of the fields, to really understand what's happening, and then to see which is predator, which is natural enemies, which are pests, so that the necessary actions can be taken. But with this drone technology, it's just more calendar spraying as before. It's going to affect natural enemies of pests. Pollinator populations like bees are going to be affected. The runoffs to nearby water sources, rivers, lakes, and the effect in aquatic organisms. So it's going to affect the whole environmental, the ecosystem and the environment. So it's going to be a major problem. The drift exposure higher, it's both human health and the environment. I think Dr. Reddy talked about the issue of privacy, but also trespassing and the damage to property and livestock. He talked about how the drone technology, the battery needs often is a problem. It needs to be charged. It's also like dropping from the sky, affecting people and property. And one of the things I just want to emphasize, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 12, which says that, there should be no interference with, his privacy at that time, they were not very gender sensitive, but privacy, family, home, and etc. So the drift and the toxic impact of pesticides will have this kind of impact on property and human health and the environment. Then the lack of information on efficacy. We really don't, there's no real information about how efficient and, what's the kind of effect of this drone. So complete lack of information of what's happening on the ground. So as a result, you have that there's a lack of information and data on drone technology and their impacts. There's a lack of evaluation, and so the regulations are not able to keep up to the this new technology. As the previous panelist was talking about, it's also expensive. It's coming down, but a lot of the technology is still expensive. If you talk about the maintenance, the battery, and the continued use of this drone technology. So what's happening now is that we also did a bit of. I also did a bit of research on what and who is controlling this drone market. And it's expected to reach US 5.19 billion by 2025, which is a huge, very fast expansion of sales in terms of the drone. And a lot of it is the biggest producers and sellers of drones is United States, Israel, and China. And if you look at this, a lot of it is also military use, but there's also a lot of use in agriculture. So if you look at the number one, it is the DJI technology from China. And if you remember when Trump was in power, he also talked about removing, China's technology, especially the drone technology, TikTok, and all the other things. And so China was big seller of drones in the US. And so there are a lot of companies are now coming in to fill the space in the drone market in the US. So the first, because is DJI technology, China-based, AeroVironment, US, Israel Aerospace Industry, And then there's some from France, Germany, and Japan. So you can see that these are the big developed countries that, of course, China is a growing developed, from developing, it's really growing very fast. So you find that these are really the big producers and the in the drone market, and it's going to be monopoly control again, and so the profits are going to be taken by these corporations. And I just wanted to focus on DJI a little bit because it's the biggest, and it's 80% of the world's commercial drone business, and it sells about 1 billion worth of drones to the US every year. It is Chinese state-backed company, but it's still privately owned, and so it's big. So what's the way forward? If you look at with all the health and environmental impacts of pesticides, and the drone technology it's continuing to further intensify the impact of pesticides. So we would like to suggest to advance agroecology, not go into a technology that is just taking us back towards human health and environmental adverse impacts, but go forward in terms of agroecology, which is beneficial, and it should be pursued in the context of a thoroughgoing agrarian reform and long-term rural development. It's viable, it's pro-people, it's pro-planet alternative, and all these women doing agroecology from India to Laos, thousands of farmers are practicing agroecology. They are happier because they don't have this high cost in terms of inputs, and they're also able to feed their family, get good income because of agroecology. And but in order for it to thrive, it needs a reliable state support for production and extension services, and domestic market that will absorb locally agroecologically grown farm produce. And as I said, thousands of small food producers in Asia producing food and fiber through agroecology. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Saro, for giving a detailed account on the global scenario and issues of drones and also drone marketing. And you also highlighted health and exposure risk, and also you highlighted agroecology as an alternative to go ahead. Thank you so much. Now we have the final speaker, Sri Jayakumar C. Jayakumar Chelotan is the director of Pesticide Action Network India, and is a well-known campaigner as well. He has been part of campaigns such as Zero Waste, and he was in the forefront of campaign on demanding the endosulfan ban. Endosulfan is a notorious pesticide that caused harm to communities in Kerala and in some other countries as well. He has been engaged in international advocacy for chemical safety with a special focus on persistent organic pollutants, waste management, pesticide safety, biodiversity-based ecological agriculture, food sovereignty, and green livelihoods. Over to you, Jayakumar sir. Sir, can you make it full screen, I think?
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Dilip, and happy that I think there is some problem in my presentation. Dilip, is it running on its own or is it running on my queue? Sorry.
I hope you can see now.
Yeah. So, am I sharing or you're sharing?
I just shared it for you.
Okay. Okay. So I'll stop my sharing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can't see Dilip. If you're just sharing, please. Yeah. Okay. I think. So I think. Sorry for the confusion in the last minute. I will close in another 4-5 minutes because I have a very short presentation. So when we talk about aerial spraying, this helicopter spray and the whirlwind of pesticide trail it is leaving, and visually you can see how it is impacting. Next, please, Dilip. See, we all talk about, like my previous speakers also said about this cost. This is not about drones, this is about helicopter spraying. In Kerala, we had this infamous issue of endosulfan spray in Kasaragod. Over the years, probably in the 20-24 years of spraying, the government might have saved some money. But today, there are issues which the state government is facing, which the central government is facing, and which is the corporation which sprayed in pesticide in Kasaragod is facing. One is the National Human Rights Commission has taken its final position that pesticide spraying by air violated individual human rights. So it just ordered a interim compensation of 5 lakhs as a initial compensation. So this order was in 2011 and the amount was not paid. But there was a Supreme Court direction, and now finally in the last 1 month, the district collector and the state government has put their best efforts to clear 95% of the due amount, which is roughly about 20.6 million rupees paid in cash compensation. And imagine the kind of money which the state has to spend for rehabilitation treatment and the whole related kind of cost from 2006. So mostly we see in silos. We see in silos of saving some man labor hours, and we say that it is cheap, which is not actually cheap. There is a larger cost. This is not including the failures in ecosystem services. This is not including the personal damages caused by the people. This is just the simple compensation by the Human Rights Commission plus the cost spent by the government to meet the medical expenses. Similarly, you see the argument that the aerial spraying can cover wider areas or big areas, and it can control the pest in a big way. But the more areas you cover, the damage also, in that sense, become wider and bigger. So in Kasaragod, we see that from the boundary of the plantations, as far as 20 kilometers, was the kind of a drift which impacted on people. And the same thing, it impacted the production of both commercial plantation corporation and the crops in the homes, and primarily because there was a huge collapse in honeybee population. So mostly the issues of cost and advantages when we talk may come from isolated statements or isolated perceptions or a small claim by the industry, which is not, as Dr. Indira Devi correctly said, which is not thoroughly researched or verified and validated. Next, please. In terms of aerial spraying, this is a very old published paper in 1995, which says that less than 0.1% of pesticide applied for pest control reached their target. This is during the spraying of DDT for controlling the moths in those times, gypsy moths. And see, that is the kind of an efficiency. We are talking about increase in efficiency in agriculture to increase the income, in overall, we talk about automation or talk about any new intervention as an increase in efficiency. But here we see that nearly 99.9% of the pesticide is sprayed to off target, creating huge havoc. And the living example is what we see in Kasaragod. So it caused damages to public health. It kills the beneficial biota. It contaminate the soil, water, and I don't want to get into details because my previous speakers already gone into that. Next, please. And again, from the helicopter, when you come down to drone, this again a picture which is giving you the micro winds it creates. I mean, Dr. Reddy was talking about that. And so as again, the drift is a huge problem, whether you do with aerial bigger machines or a smaller machine. So I think we need to be patient. We really need to look at this very closely and take a final decision at a little later stage whether this can be used. Dilip, next. It's only very few slides. I think one of the core issue which I really want to bring attention of all is that since 1962, after publication of Silent Spring, we are talking about problems of pesticides. But the progress seems very slow. Not even a single policy which is regulating a global policy which is regulating the pesticide use or sale, or there is nothing happening at the level which you heard from Sarojini Rangam that how the big corporations are controlling and how the double standards are there. So all this in the last, even after, there could be things which is happening before we knew about these things. And since the public knowledge of pesticides are there for the last 60 years, and many things are continuing without any slowing of the business. And if you look at that, all these years, the sellers and manufacturers are getting richer and richer, and the farmers are losing income, the resources are lost, and the farming community and the farming, the entire agriculture systems are collapsing in most of the developing countries, including India. So now the government needs to find money and pour as much as it can, and it also has its own development priorities. So at the end of it, the biggest receiving community globally now is the farming community and the farm workers. The corporate profits have increased, expanding to newer diverse portfolios, but the community loss and farmer and worker collapse is pushed to the margins. It is not addressed in the public domain. And the first slide I showed about the compensation to underserved victims is a very, very rare light in the darkness, which probably maybe because it happened in Kerala and the state government is very positive about that, and they are under pressure from the Supreme Court to do that. So the whole issue is pushed to the margins. The public funding for farming is stolen by technology, and farming becomes more economically challenging. This is also one truth which we have to understand when we talk about any technology or any intervention. The total exposure to human health and environment caused by pesticides cannot be reduced by change in tool. The fundamental issue is pesticides are hazardous and poison. So the more we talk about the technology, we can't forget that we need to really stop all the highly hazardous pesticides, at least as a beginning, as a progressive to address it. And that is why probably the PAN call for a global phase out of highly hazardous pesticides becomes much more important. Next, please, Dilip. See, we talk about technologies in this. I think mostly what is happening is the more precise dusting or spraying with different machines, and you talk about efficiencies, and the whole challenge is it is not proved that it is efficient. So now the more we talk, more we talk about what you call efficiencies. The spraying tool actually dictates the politics of farming. Like in a common large area, if a technology becomes a choice, then the technology will decide what should be grown there. So the farmers' choices will be stolen, and that will be one reality when we talk about any new technology. Next, please, Didi. And finally, I think this is a very sane statement from Jane, Dr. Jane Goodall, one of my favorite scientists. She said, how could we have ever believed that it was a good idea to grow our food with poisons? And that need to be addressed before we talk more about efficiencies. Thank you for listening, and thank you very much. And I purposefully try to cut short because I think we have to meet our time deadline. Thank you, Dilip. Thank you for everyone for listening.
Thank you, Jaykumar sir, for this insightful presentation. You highlighted about the hidden cost of pesticide application, whether it is helicopter, whether it's drone, or whether it is manual. There is always a hidden cost involved, and which is a huge burden for the governments. I apologize that we couldn't organize this translation of the sessions because all these the three speakers are not native Hindi speakers. So may I request Reddy ji to give a summary of all the three presentations in Hindi. After that, we can go into a very short open forum.
I'm not sure it is required. But anyway, that was a promise. So I think Dr. Indra Devi was mentioning about the need for more research because the preliminary research or whatever level of research which is happening right. Sorry, Hindi. Okay. जो मैं हिंदी में बताने के लिए दिलीप आमंत्रित किया तो मैं इंग्लिश में बता रहा था. डॉक्टर इंदिरा देवी उनका जो रिसर्च है उनके बारे में बता रहे थे कि वो लोग ये ड्रोन स्प्रेइंग के ऊपर थोड़ा बहुत रिसर्च कर चुके हैं और उसमें जो मुद्दे आए हैं वो सामने वो मैं जो बात कर रहा था वो उनका वही मुद्दों का जिक्र उन्होंने किया है और जो सरकार जो स्टैंडर्ड ऑपरेटिंग प्रोसीजर्स लाया उसमें स्टैंडर्ड्स लाने का ज़रूरी है और उनका बात यह है कि वो लोग केरला एग्रीकल्चर यूनिवर्सिटी सरकार को रिकमेंडेशन दिया है कि अभी पेस्टिसाइड्स का बात मत करो. अब ड्रोन के जरिए आप माइक्रो न्यूट्रिएंट्स या और कुछ स्प्रेड करें तो अच्छा है क्योंकि अभी बहुत कुछ रिसर्च करना है, स्टैंडर्डाइजेशन करना है, प्रामाणिकता निकालना है इसमें. और उनका मानना है कि ये यांत्रिकरण जो हो रहा है ये जरूर होता रहता है क्योंकि वो ज़रूरी लगता है. अब इसमें जो कॉस्ट है जो उसके लिए जो जितना खर्चा होता है वो खर्चा यांत्रिकरण से कम होने का आशंका जो है वो तो है ही है. इसलिए ये ड्रोन का इस्तेमाल जो खेत में हो रहा है उसमें जहाँ ज़रूरत हो वहाँ अभी तो यूज़ करें लेकिन पेस्टिसाइड स्प्रेइंग में रिसर्च के बाद उस टाइम पे और रिसर्च के जरिए करना चाहिए बोल के उनका बात था. तो सरोजनी रंगन जी मलेशिया में रहते हैं. उनका बात पूरा ग्लोबल लेवल पे जो उनका रिसर्च था वो उनका प्रेजेंटेशन बताया कि पहले तो उन्होंने बताया कि पेस्टिसाइड पॉइजनिंग से जो हर साल अभी ड्रोन या ड्रोन के पहले हर साल जो कम से कम 35 लाख लोग इसके बारे में इससे उनका सेहत बिगड़ जा रहा है और 11,000 लोग मर रहे हर साल. और जो 1990 में 25 मिलियन था वो अभी 385 मिलियन हो गया ये पेस्टिसाइड पॉइजनिंग का एक्सपोजर से. तो ये बढ़ रहा है. ये बढ़ना अच्छा नहीं है क्योंकि लोग किसान या ग्रामीण प्रांत में लोग उसका प्रभाव उनके ऊपर पड़ रहा है और बच्चों के ऊपर भी खासकर उनका ऊपर भी इसका प्रभाव दिख रहा है. और जो ये अभी जो आंकड़े हैं ये सिर्फ जो इफेक्ट हुआ है लेकिन जो कैंसर है और जो भी दीर्घकाल रोग जो आते हैं उसका आंकड़े अभी नहीं है लेकिन पेस्टिसाइड से ये पूरा आता बोल के उन्होंने बताया. और वो ड्रोन के बारे में ड्रोन से जो अभी रिसर्च है वो तो बहुत कम हुआ है लेकिन ड्रोन लाने के लिए बड़े बड़े कंपनियां आगे आ रहे हैं। अभी जो मार्केट है ड्रोन मार्केट, वो चाइना का सबसे बड़ा कंपनी है और बाकी के ज़्यादातर यूएस के कंपनी है, अमेरिका कंपनी है, इजराइल के कंपनी, जापान, जर्मनी के। तो सबसे बड़ा कंपनी चाइना का है, वो ड्रोन मार्केट में 80% उसका शेयर है। तो ये बहुत बड़ा कंपनी है और ये कंपनियां पूरे मार्केट को अपना कंट्रोल में रखने के लिए उनका सरकार के नीतियों को इन्फ्लुएंस कर रहे हैं, उन्होंने बताया। जय कुमार जी, तो ये जो अनुभव है केरला में एंडोसल्फान एरियल स्प्रेइंग 1985 से हो रहा था, उसका जो असर हुआ, उसका प्रभाव जो हुआ, उसे आज केरला सरकार बहुत खर्चा करना पड़ रहा है। उन्होंने बता रहे थे कि हम अभी देख रहे हैं कि ड्रोन से खर्चा कम होता और जो आदमी स्प्रेइंग करे तो उससे कम खर्चा होता बोल रहे हैं। लेकिन आगे बढ़कर इसके पेस्टिसाइड से जो प्रभावशील होता है, इससे खर्चा अपने को आगे दिखता है और वो उसका खर्चा कौन उठाएगा, कहाँ से आएगा, ये भी अहम मुद्दा है। और उनका मानना है कि हम 1962 से पेस्टिसाइड्स के बारे में और पेस्टिसाइड से जो ये सेहत के ऊपर जो प्रभाव हो रहा है उसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं। लेकिन पूरा दुनिया भर में सरकार नीतियाँ अभी तक बहुत देर से आ रहे, बहुत कम आ रहे और उसको बढ़ावा देने का काम हम लोग करना है, क्योंकि इससे आने वाला पीढ़ी को बहुत दिक्कत हो रहा है। तो पेस्टिसाइड बेस्ड पॉलिसी आना बहुत ज़रूरी है बोल के उन्होंने बताया था। I hope I covered.
Thank you, Reddy. I think you summarized it, all the three presentations. So any Hindi friends watching, they would have been benefited. Thank you so much. I think it's time for open session. However, I don't see any questions in the chat box. So among the participants, if you have any questions, please raise your hand. We can allow a few questions for the time being. We are running a bit late.
I think before questions come, maybe I'll just add a few points, if at all. Do you think we can do that, or Dilip?
Yeah, of course we can do that, and I don't see any hands raised or any questions in the box, so maybe you can add a few points.
Anant is raising a hand.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Narasimha Garu, thank you very much. My question was, yesterday Syngenta was given approvals for fungicide sprays, 2 fungicide sprays. Now, I mean, they're saying they're Syngenta India, but Syngenta is now a Chinese government company. So is there any concerns anywhere? I mean, what is going on? I mean, I don't understand this.
No, this Make in India, in fact, yesterday I've seen data which says in the last 5 years, when even Make in India slogan has come, even during that time, our imports from China have doubled and tripled. So it's almost 62%. It has increased by 62%, and our exports to China have risen by only 0.61%. So this government, when it says Make in India and we will free ourselves from China imports, I think they are not following what they are saying. So that's there. And in pesticides, of course, this issue is there where foreign multinational companies, they are trying to take control of Indian markets. and government regulation, in fact, is helping such increase in the shares of the MNCs by bringing ease of market, ease of pesticide registrations. So now they created a new portal and they are saying registrations are made easier. In fact, yesterday I seen there are almost 7,800 companies registered in Indian portal. I don't know where are these companies, what kind of products they are bringing. So I think this question is still there. And as part of the drone, I think again the market shares are going to shift because this 477 formulations which are approved, I think those we need to again go through with a fine comb to understand how it can shift the market shares of different companies. So right now, government is not interested in this foreign deshi, all this kind of discussions.
Is there any requirement that be certified by a university or ICAR research institution before a corporate company can get approval from the government? Is there any requirement like that?
No. They have reduced. In fact, Central Insecticide Board is now they have as part of the ease of doing business, they have a window period of certain days to give approval for registrations. So these additional reviews or external reviews, all those are out of question. I think they are easing the registration. So what you are asking seems to be a very ambitious suggestion from the government point of view.
Thank you so much. Any more questions from the participants?
No, even while someone asked, my point, I thought because between this translation Hindi, English, some of the thoughts I lost. I thought the main point which I could, get from whatever analysis I did is eventually, like we have seen seeds where seeds, until 2002 it was public seed system in India where sharing and bartering and reuse was very free. After 2002, with the introduction of BT cotton, gradually I think that the atmosphere of seed quality control sovereignty is being lost. So I feel drone based aerial spraying of pesticides is also one of the paths which are going to dispossess Indian farmers of sovereignty in various ways. Like one is the package, as I mentioned. When you're looking at the SOP, eventually they'll tell you because drones have to do precision agriculture, and this precision agriculture requires monocultures. So they're going to introduce a package, a financial package, which make drone usage compulsory. So basically using the argument that drones are efficient in delivering pesticide spray and plant protection. So I think there are several pathways I can see where this disposition is going to happen. So I feel it's not just, we cannot just talk about drone technology and the efficacy or efficiency of pesticide spraying or plant protection. Of course, the entire agroecology rejects this usage of these methods at all. But then the other point is where we are looking at the disempowerment process which these drones are doing. Already we have seen how farmers, at least they had some place in the Central Insecticide Board. Even that is now lost, so the consultation, they are completely excluded. So we can see that this imposition coming through precision agriculture, that's what they're saying. Drone is a representative of precision agriculture in India. I think we need to be cautious and we need to be monitoring this situation. And I hope all the participants are going to join me in building pressure on the government to negate this approach of the government, and we need to curtail the speed with which the government is moving on this.
Yeah, Reddy, I think there are one question in the chat box, which is what is the forward given that there are so many concerns, and what is that PAN is proposing? And along with that, there is a comment: is there a way to bring forward all these concerns to the government and the notifications get reversed? What Jayan mentioned as farmers' choice being dictated by technology is extremely concerning. Maybe Dr. Reddy or Sarojini can address this.
I can, if once Jayan or...
sorry, Jayan is left because he has another meeting, because we are running short. And also, Dr. Indra also left because she has to join another meeting.
Will answer Indian context. Maybe Sarojini can add, because she also has a fair understanding of Asia. Already we have brought all these concerns to the attention of the government. As I mentioned, only because of the pressure we built, they now brought a SOP. Otherwise, I think DGCA would have given a blanket permission to drone operators without even involving Central Insecticide Board. But that's not enough. I think we all need to come together. Basically, one is increasing our own knowledge of what is happening, and then through that process, bringing more people to a campaign which can try to stop the government from pushing this as a solution for increasing yields in India. So we need to come together, we need to act together, and we need to push agroecological solutions.
Saru, please.
I think for Asia, it's very clear. We have been having a series of campaigns to call for a phase out of the highly hazardous pesticides and to replace them with agroecology. One of the things that is happening is that FAO is now moving towards all this kind of technologies. In fact, they are promoting this drone technology and all the mobile application technologies. And one of the things that we are seeing is that there is toxic science, FAO and CropLife. And CropLife, as you know, is the club of big producers that includes Bayer, Syngenta, and other big TNCs, and Curitiba. So this toxic alliance is very dangerous because it's really promoting, FAO is, in a way promoting, a collaboration with these big pesticide companies. And we have done a big campaign to say stop this toxic alliance, and we have about 200,000 signatures with individual signatures with 350 CSOs, NGOs signing on to this. It's a global campaign, and we have delivered it to FAO. and they're having some discussions on conflict of interest and FAO's conflict of interest. So that's one big campaign. The other campaign is protect our children from toxic pesticides. As I mentioned, children are very much exposed and it's affecting their health and their intelligence. And we're talking about our future generations. So I think that's very important as Asia, as global, that we take on all these, and support these campaigns that are really talking about moving away from these pesticides. And drone technology is going to just intensify further this pesticide use. So as Dr. Reddy mentioned, I think agroecology is the way forward. We need to advance that. We have to move that into a mainstream it. It used to be mainstream. Now, industrial agriculture is coming. The corporate agriculture has taken over. So we need to now move towards agroecology that is really for the people, and it's pro people and environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Saru. I see two hands raised. One is Dr. Shiv Prasad Reddy. Shiv Prasad Reddy, please unmute and make your video on.
Yeah, thank you. It was a wonderful webinar which I was listening to, thought-provoking, and I'm happy to host it through my Environment People DRTSPR channels. I think Sarojini Rangam was part and parcel of this earlier too. What really beats my intelligence is because Narasimha Reddy Garu is considered as one of the best policy analysts, not just in the country, in the world, when it matters. Don't you think these politicians, if they are not well read, these bureaucrats, these IAS lobbies aren't aware of such type of pesticides? If they are sprayed, how devastating it would be. And not only that, ignoring just normal spraying, if we are doing that through drones, how badly it will affect the environment. And when I'm saying environment, it is the collective symbiosis of humans, then the air, the water, and the Mother Earth. And what is that they are expecting? The yield from such, the highest yield using such pesticides. Don't you think once you consume such type of food which comes out of these pesticides, don't you think it is going to derange your health much further, exposing your immunity so that you can become a sitting duck for so-called planned pandemics?
One is, I think you raised a very pertinent question. In fact, Indian Constitution has a defined procedure whenever you are bringing policies or changing policies. We have defined consultative process. In fact, that consultation is now being reduced. If you see in this case of aerial spraying, drone-based aerial spraying, as I mentioned, they cut short the entire process to 2 years, less than 2 years. And only when we raised the question, then they brought in SOP. And even that SOP is not consulted. Leave alone farmers, even academics who were involved, like Dr. Indra Devi was there. So they have given some suggestions because some rudimentary research has happened in various universities. Even those results have not been reflected in the SOP. So basically, I think the bureaucrats are now, hobnobbing with these companies or under the pressure of the companies. So it's now for them, it's only file pushing. They don't understand the realities of Indian agriculture or Indian rural realities. So even that committee, which has, in fact, on paper, they say they have deliberated for 2 years, But when you look at the specific provisions, like I mentioned, 24-hour notice to intimation to the panchayats. They don't know how panchayats function in India and why panchayats need to be empowered to deal with regulate drones or aerial spraying. Not only aerial spraying, Even all other aspects, I think they are becoming a threat to privacy, they are becoming a social problem, and they have a potential as a weapons as well. In fact, I have suggested in the drone rules, this can be a hazardous weapon, by itself, You just drop a drone on somebody's head and you can, score, you can settle your scores. Or the drone can just, drop a payload of pesticides on in a tank or a lake. It has happened. I'm not imagining. In India, we have cases where rivals, conflicts have led to poisoning of wells, poisoning of tanks by pesticides. So I think by liberalizing, drone-based aerial spraying without any regulation, without even rudimentary regulation, I think government and bureaucrats are doing a great disservice to India, and so that's where I think they don't understand anything. Just looking at their own kitty, which comes maybe legally or illegally to them. So this push by the highest level of government decision making is for a very short objectives probably, and they don't even gel with the larger nation building objective as well.
But don't you think they eat the same food and they are not the last ones and least ones? If they look right and left, they have their own children. Don't you think they are polluting this environment to such a level wherein it becomes very difficult for their children to survive? And what is the food they are eating? Are they not aware? They are all well read. They become IAS officers, bureaucrats. And how do you think? You mean to say they eat different food?
That's what you are appealing to the personal conscience and the ethical considerations. I'm saying leave all that. If they go by what Indian Constitution has laid down, and if they can behave professionally, I don't think these kind of regulations would have come. Of course, we can have a lot of discussion on Indian bureaucracy.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Reddy and Shivprad Reddy, for this discussion. I think there are a lot more issues to be discussed. Maybe we can have that later time because we do have a shorter window now. There is one more hand raised, which is Ananta Krishnan. Can you comment in a few words?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of things which might have been left out. One was there are a lot of schemes coming to institutions like Krishi Vigyan Kendras. The government is giving 10 lakhs to buy a drone. But unfortunately, a lot of these institutions are located in remote places. And if you send a 10 lakh piece of equipment, it's going to malfunction. So who's going to maintain that? I mean, is this going to sit in the wall and be a tourist attraction? Eventually. So there goes 10 lakhs in the drain. Because I talk to a lot of institutions and they're like, okay, we like it, but who's going to maintain it? What if something goes wrong? We don't have the skill set. We don't have the time. So that is one of the points that we need to be looking closely, because a lot of these institutions are going to end up with very expensive equipment. And initially, when all these equipment are new, there are going to be failures and malfunction, obviously, till people come to an equilibrium. So this is something that came up in our discussions in remote places, and we visited institutions asking them about these schemes, because everybody and their aunt is applying for these schemes now. It's quite lucrative schemes right now. The government is doling out money to buy a drone. Second point was the economic viability of the small entrepreneur to operate a drone throughout the year. That is still not there. So I think what we'll see is eventually big companies just renting out drones in their name and throwing their pesticide out there as offering as a service, because the economic viability of an activity throughout the year, it's just not there, because there are only 2 growing seasons unless you do it for vegetables or whatever. So that is also a big question mark that is hanging out, because they keep saying village level entrepreneur can make 30,000 rupees a month, but what is he or she going to do when the season is not there? And you're not spraying throughout the season. So the drone is going to be sitting on the shelf, no income. So, so that also needs to be scrutinized very closely and see which way this is going, that big companies are going to end up renting this as a service. And then they're not going to, what are the liabilities then? just wanted to, throw these 2 points out. Totally agree with Narasimha Garu about rural police. Rural police is already handling fintech scams. They don't need agtech scams. I mean, fintech scams are already completely, it's going so crazy that people are getting swindled left and right. Now you're throwing another scams at the rural police. So I'm totally with you, Narasimha Garu, that I'm completely scared what, with all these anti-social elements and this as an object that can be used to settle scores. So I'm with you on that. That is very concerning for me right now. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ananda Krishna. And maybe if there are any final remarks from Dr. Reddy and Ms. Sarojini Rangam, please.
I only request all the participants and maybe through them, their friends and everyone to join, because we are getting drone-based aerial pesticide spraying completely. All other arguments which we are discussing only reinforce our conclusion that this does not work in India, but of course everywhere. We know in, of course, the agriculture pesticide itself has created havoc rather than a solution for food crisis or climate change crisis. I think all of you should join and join us, and I can share the contents of our comments and the letters. Maybe we can do a sign on and bring pressure on the government to stop promoting aerial pesticide, aerial spraying through drones. I think we need to work on that. Thank you for joining sitting so far. I think through your efforts, we are going to progress on this as well.
Thank you, Reddy. Saro, please.
Yeah, thank you also to all the participants and the panelists. I think it was a very good webinar. Yes, I agree with Dr. Reddy. We should join hands, fight this drone technology, which will only make life more difficult because of the impact on human health and the environment due to pesticides. I mean, it's crazy to think that, drone technology can help maintain food security or to, have food sovereignty. It's not going to happen. It's only going to make it worse. Farmers are going to be continue to be miserable, impacted by these pesticides, but also they don't have that income that they are promised. So thank you very much, and please join us.
Thank you, Saro. I think we have come to a good end of this webinar, and I would like to thank the panelists, Dr. Narasimha Reddy, Dr. Indira Devi, Ms. Sarojini Rangam, and Sri Jay Kumar for joining the webinar and making the presentations. I also thank all the participants who were part of this 2.5 hours. It is a bit longer than expected. Anyway, thank you so much for joining the webinar and taking part in the discussions. So we will just end the discussion for the time being. We will continue to engage more in the coming days, because drone is a kind of dangerous technology being pushed towards the agriculture sector, and in India especially it is not been discussed in the parliament. There is no legislative backup to support or to regulate the process of drone application. It has not been part of the pesticide management bill as well, which is a bit worrying situation for all of us in India. Thank you so much. Have a good time.
Good night.